Alrighty, so today we're just going to start by going over a standard, what we call a proforma for a rental property. It is basically where we take all the projected or actual rent numbers and expenses and property taxes, all that kind of stuff, put it all together, and then we see what our return on investment would be, cash on cash return, cap rate, all that kind of stuff. I'll explain here in a second. Let me just get that pulled up here. Maybe. Alrighty. So here's an example proforma right here. This is just going to be the template we're using, so I'm just going to clear out some of this stuff in here. So we'll start off. We'll go look for a property on Zillow.com is where I like to look for properties, and then once we get more serious, we'll talk with a real estate agent. We have a couple different we work with. So just kind of look in this area here. I don't really like Nampa a ton, mainly because that's just far away from where we're at. We just like to stay kind of North Boise, Meridian area. This is my favorite area right in here, all the suburbs. As you go south of the freeway, rents kind of fall off typically is what we've seen, and it's usually harder to get them to rent, especially during dead season, which is winter. Basically, whenever school is in session, it's much harder to rent out properties, so we try to hit it right in the summer and try to stay in the better areas, a little bit more densely populated areas up here too. So we'll just sort. We got 4 beds, 2 baths. We like to do that, but I mean, you can do just about any size house. 4 beds, 2 baths are usually less common in the rental market than 3 bedrooms. That's why we like to do it, because we aren't competing with a bunch of other rentals listed. So we'll just stick with 4 beds, 2 baths. We'll unselect lots of land. I'll keep condos selected. And multifamily, just because sometimes people will list their stuff on Zillow incorrectly. So we'll just look here, sort price low to high. We don't want all these new builds. They're usually going to be overpriced, especially for a rental. But sometimes they aren't. But I mean, they don't even show the price here, so we'll just cut those out by putting a minimum of $300,000. And then you see like this one. This one's a little small, only 1,400 square feet. I mean, we could do that. I mean, maybe we'll run a proforma on that. But I typically like to stay on the larger side, just kind of set us apart from the rest of the rentals on the market, help it rent out faster. So I usually do 1,750 square feet and up. So we're still getting some in Nampa, so I'll just kind of draw a boundary in here. Just kind of get this whole area generally. All right, there we go. So now it just gives us what's in this little circle here. So like the first one we got here, this one looks either new, like new construction, or fairly new. Let's take a look at this one first. Looks pretty nice on the inside. It's got laminate countertops, engineered flooring, probably built by CBH would be my guess. Yep, CBH right there. And it is CBH selling it, so it is brand new. CBH recently has kind of been on the lower quality end. I mean, there's still options to keep in mind. You just have to be very detailed in your walkthroughs and inspections just to make sure they fix everything. Want to look into that warranty. We haven't bought in any CBH, like new CBH recently. Just a lot of the ones I've walked through have had tons of issues, walls kind of crooked or floors bowing up, all that kind of stuff. But usually most of that I hear is covered under the warranty. The house we bought a couple years ago is a CBH, but it was built like 2006, 2007. It's a decent quality though. So this one, it's only $384,999. That's $30K cut in price on the first of the month, which isn't surprising. That's what's happening in just about everything right now. This is why now can be a better time to buy, even with the higher interest rates. So we want to come down here and just see what it has available. It doesn't really have tax history because it's a brand new house. That's something we're going to need for the proforma, but we can look that up or look up some comparisons to that. So first we're going to go back to this proforma. Year built, put 2022. That one I believe was in Meridian. No, it's Boise. So we'll just plug in Boise right here. Just kind of organization purposes. It doesn't affect the numbers at all. So then we'll just grab the address, plug it in right here. Oh, I can't go. There we go. All right, and then the price for $384,990. So plug that price in. Usually like to run the proformas on the list price just because it's easier and more conservative. But I mean, you can also run them just on a pre-negotiated price or a price you're hoping to negotiate it down to. You just want to stay conservative with your numbers. And so running this, interest isn't 3 1/4 anymore. It's probably going to be more 6 1/4, 7. So we'll just do 6 3/4. Closing costs, we'd probably stick closer to like the 1.9%. From what I've been seeing, we'll do an assumed annual rate of appreciation of 4%. That's pretty conservative. I mean, compared to the last couple of years, we've gone up 12, 20% in a year. Average over the last 20 years or so, I've rented out, it averages about 4% or a little higher. Usually bounces between 4 and 6% on average. And that's pretty close to the average rate of inflation. So that's all pretty conservative there. Approximate square footage, we'll want to enter that in here. So that's 1860. So again, this does not affect the numbers, but it just helps you stay organized. And I believe it was 4 bedrooms, 2 baths. It's 2-car garage. We don't know the market rents yet. So we'll just come down here. As far as operating expenses, I mean, we mainly have like the utilities here. Usually we do not pay for the utilities, our tenants do. But we just kind of throw a couple $100 in here just for the vacant times that we have to pay for. When no one's living there. But usually that's pretty minimal. And then we'll look up HOA fee, $460 a year. So we'll come down here. Let's see which column. So $460 a year. That's $38 a month. Cleaning, repairs, and maintenance. This we usually do 3 to 5% of gross rents is what we assume for that, and it's been pretty dead on. But I mean that's why it's not showing up here because we haven't put in any rents yet. So we'll go over that in a minute. Usually newer ones we're able to stay more toward 3%, but we'll change it back and forth. Just kind of look at both sides of the numbers. Advertising, usually $125 covers it just fine. It's all taken care of by the management company. Insurance, $600 to $800 usually covers just about any single family home. That's $600 to $800 a year. Our management company charges 7% for management. I know some others will charge 8%, and then you go to some like Home River. I've heard they're charging like 10 plus. And then they also have a ton of extra fees. One we use just charges us 7%. I believe their new customers are around 8 to 9%, but they also don't really nickel and dime us, so that's why we like using them so much. So we just assume 7% there. All right, so now we need to go and find the property taxes. So there's a few ways we can do this. We'll start by going to the assessor. This one is in Boise, so it's in Ada County. So we'll go to the Ada County Assessor's website. Just come in here, property search and online maps, then search by address, accept the terms. There we go, we'll search that. Then it loads. All right, so 10, 6, 7, 8. Sometimes the address isn't the same. It comes up. All right, yeah, so that's the right address there. So a lot of the time, these new ones will just be assessed on their land value for the first year or two, just because they haven't assessed it with the new house. So yeah, so there's no taxes because it's only been assessed this year and it's just on the land, 138. So we'll basically just have to find comparable houses and what they've been paying in property taxes. Or, I mean, we could also do it just based on the levy rate. But let's look at, we'll find a comparable house first. I mean, this one's kind of comparable. This one's still in Boise, so it ought to have similar property taxes, about the same size, same list price anyway. Scroll down here, it gives us our property taxes of $1,999. That's assessed value of $354,900. So this is one way we can do it. It's just about 2,000. That's the number I'll probably just use, but I'll show you in a second how you can manually calculate out specifically what the property taxes would be at most. But first we'll go, so now we need to figure out what our market rents are going to be. So usually when I get more serious in a property, I'll just send an email to my property management company and they will be able to send an estimate of what houses like that are renting for and what they can get it rented out for. But just to get a rough estimate, I mean, Zillow sometimes provides a rent estimate. I don't think it does on this one. I usually don't trust that because it's off more times than it's right. So let's open up another tab with Zillow here. We'll just look in the same area. So this one was kind of, is off of, road is that 5 Mile and Freeway. It's a new development over there, right across the street from a storage place. So we'll remove the boundary, we'll switch it over to rent. We don't want to cap it at all or put a bottom. 4 beds, 2 baths. We don't want our filters to be too tight here because we want to be able to get a good sampling of what rents are like. So we'll just keep all that open. So during the summer, which is a primary season for rentals, there's a lot more rentals on here to compare. It's dead season though, so there's not a whole lot we can compare. A lot of the times we can zoom in quite close like this and see, but we can't really do that right now. I mean, the closest one is a very different house in a bit different area. So we'll want to zoom out here, just kind of look at some of these others. What's the lowest one? I mean, even if I zoom all the way out here, it looks like the lowest one is still like 1800, 1825. That's pretty small. So yeah, I mean, there's townhouse here for 1895. So I mean, in the summer of next year, going based on what I saw this year, I'd say a house like that, 2-car garage, 4 bed, 2 baths. I'd say that could probably go mid 2000s. But right now, just for proforma purposes, we'll just use some of the rents we're seeing here. So I mean, there's a lot hovering around 1895, similar. So I'm going to go about 1900 on this. But you can go as conservative as you'd like on these. Most time rents go up anyway, so they'll usually go up around May, June-ish, sometimes in April, depending on the market. And then they'll just kind of fall off a cliff basically once you enter September. After school starts, nobody's moving, nobody wants to move, that kind of thing. So you got $1,900 a month in here, estimated rents. So that gives us gross rents of $22,800 a year. But we also have vacancy and economic loss. So this basically is the accounting metric that accounts on average will be vacant 4% of the time. And so it takes out $912 a year out of rents, or $76 a month. So that gives us a gross income off this property of $21,888. So we come down here, takes out the $200 utilities. Then you can see our cleaning and maintenance. We had it at 5%, which I usually put for most houses. older houses. They're going to take more maintenance. However, this being a brand new one probably is, well, not probably, it does have new HVAC, new roof, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we could probably throw in just 3% for this one. I mean, that brings it to only $657. I mean, the first year you might have, a few $100 in things that you got to fix up just to make it rent worthy. I know we usually have to put in blinds, and we seal around underneath the baseboards, between the baseboards and the flooring in the new builds. That's usually no more than a few $100. So $657, I feel comfortable with that. We'll put that in there. Keep the same marketing. And 7% management fees, $1,532. So then now we'll go up to the top here. So this is what we'll put in, $384,990 as our purchase price. And we just assumed a down payment of 25%, which is what has been pretty standard to be able to cash flow over most of the last 10 years. So that's usually what we like to shoot for. But with these high interest rates, 6.75%, it's very hard to do that. And I haven't really seen any single family homes in this area, in the Boise, Meridian, Idaho area, that have been able to cash flow at 25% down. A lot of them have had to be 30, 50% down. So overall, I don't like investing when it wouldn't cash flow at that point. Mainly just because there's not a good cash buffer there. If rents go down temporarily or different things happen, even if we aren't planning on putting down just 25%, maybe we want to buy it outright or put down 50%, it's still good to have that as a metric. So this is assuming putting down $96,000. If we go with that and we scroll down here, you can see right here, after we take the gross rents of $21,888, we take out all these expenses, which is total of $5,500. And that gives us a net operating income of $16,314. So if you did buy this property with cash, you'd pull out $16,314 annually out of the property as profits after all the expenses, property taxes, insurance, the whole thing. So if we did do that, which 75% loan to value, which translates to 25% down, 6.75% interest, that would put our monthly payment at $1,873 a month, which, as you know, is just, it's what, $27 less a month than our rents. So it really does not leave much left over. That's why we're in the hole. $6,159. And so you'd have to be paying that much into this property every year to keep it. Now, one reason why someone would buy this property right now, even if they were only putting down 25%, let's say they had a little bit of money in the bank, they could cover that $6,159 a year for a couple of years. In a couple of years, in all probability, interest rates will probably come back down, at least down to 4 and 5%, and rents will have gone up, in which case they can refinance a loan at a lower interest rate, which could lower their payment. And then they're also bringing in more rents, so they'd have a larger cash flow and they'd no longer be in negative. And the reason they would do that is because then they could get the appreciation over that time if they think it's going to go up. Overall, I think it's going to go up, but that's not really a risk I would be willing to take right now. But we come down here. These are all of our main metrics we look at. So you can see our cash on cash return is a negative 6.05%. So that means, of our 96,000, after you add the closing costs in, you really need to come up with $101,000 in cash. So after putting in $101,000 in cash, you really only have, or you're paying out 6% of that, so $6,000 every year. So that's a negative cash on cash return. Properties. If this property was bringing in $10,000 a year in cash flow, after paying the mortgage and all that and all the expenses, then you'd have about a 10% cash on cash return. So that's basically just saying, what is your physical return on the physical cash you are seeing? And most people that invest in real estate, that's a good thing to look at, and that's something everybody looks at closely, because you want to make sure you have somewhat of a cash on cash return. But most people are investing in real estate for long term, for appreciation, and those who use a mortgage also for the loan principal pay down, basically meaning the renters are paying your mortgage. So that's where the returns are. In the end, let's say you get to retirement, you just have a couple of properties, you're going to want more cash coming out of it. You're going to want to own more of the property. You aren't going to want to just have 70 or 25% in equity. You're going to want to own probably the property outright, or 75% equity, which would be a 25% loan to value. Overall, just so you can get more cash out of it. All depends on your strategy. But as we go down here, so that's your cash on cash return, which is basically your net cash flow divided by your investment. So, or negative $6,159 divided by the initial investment of $101,734. And so then down here, this is where your returns really start getting good, because this is where we add basically to the net cash flow before dividing it over the total investment. This is where you add the principal pay down, which is basically how much of the actual loan amount are we paying down with the rents. Because if you remember up here, the reason we got to this negative cash flow is because we're paying such a high amount in mortgage payments. Well, part of that is going direct to principal. So you come down here, on the first year of the $22,000 you're spending on the mortgage, $19,490 is just going to interest. However, the principal pay down, how much is actually going to the principal, the actual original loan amount of the mortgage, is $2,983. And so that's really a return you're seeing, because it's overall building your equity in that property. So you come down here, basically the same calculation here, but you're just adding the principal back to it, or what you paid down on the principal of the mortgage, and then adding that to the net cash flow and dividing that by your total investment of $101,000. That gets you negative 3.1% on your investment. So overall, if these here are negative, mainly this one, if this is negative, I wouldn't do it, because it's going to be sucking cash. Overall, you just don't want things that suck cash. There's better options, at least in this market anyway. But this is where you get your internal rate of return. This is the primary measure I use. This is where you have the net cash flow plus the principal pay down, but then you add appreciation of 4% a year, and then you divide that by the total investment. So that gives you 12% rate of return. So this is why someone may see this and think, oh, well, that's worth it, because I may be putting in $6,100 a year, but I'm still getting 12% on my initial investment. So that's why you may do that. But I wouldn't, because that introduces a whole new level of risk, sucking your cash. Not to mention, most people don't take into account the risk of having the mortgage and taking on all that extra risk just for 12%, which honestly you can get pretty close to that just in the stock market on average. I wouldn't do that. But you come down a little bit further down here. This is a widely used term, cap rate or capitalization rate. This basically doesn't take into account appreciation, and it doesn't take into account your principal, or not your principal pay down, but your overall mortgage payments at all. So it's basically just dividing your net operating income, so what you have left after taking in the rents and paying down all the expenses, divided by your purchase price. It's not what you put down on the mortgage, not your $101,000, but the full purchase price of $384,000. And so now, I mean, this is one nice thing about this market right now, is where prices are starting to come down. Rents have come down a little bit, but not as far as prices are. Overall, we are seeing cap rates go up. So about 4.25% here for a single family home. If you would have looked at single family homes like 6 months ago, at least in this area, you wouldn't be seeing that. A lot of them were like 3.8%. Or 4% at best. Now, if you go like 2 years ago, they're like 4.5%. Go 5 years ago, in the last 10 years, they've been up to 5%, in between 5 and 6% even. So we're moving in a positive direction here. But right now, I still wouldn't say it's totally a buy. I'd probably wait until that cap rate gets up. Interest rates start falling again. Overall, what I'm anticipating is interest rates will keep going up until we go into somewhat more of a recession that puts downward pressure on prices. And then after that, prices adjusting and all that, the cash being sucked out of the economy, then I think rates are going to start coming down again. I think they're going to come down pretty sharply, and I think that's going to push these properties to, in 3 years will be worth more than they were at their peak over the last 2 years. So long term, it's still a good investment. I just wouldn't risk a ton of debt or a cash drain on that. But, I'd hold on to the properties you own, especially if you have them at a lower interest rate. Right now, I think interest rates are a little bit high to be buying, but you kind of make that judgment based on each property. I think a great buying period for single family is going to be coming up here within the next year or two, as they bottom out, as interest rates go high and push those prices down. And overall, we'll see the cap rates come up. The nice thing about that is then you can buy it. Well, it may be a high interest rate on the loan. If you buy it at a high cap rate, then over time, when interest rates go down, your property value is going to surge, and you're still going to have that cap rate because, rents are high and the property value will be going up, which would technically put downward pressure on the cap rate. But overall, that's going to be better long term. Buy as you see fit, but I'd hold off for a better buying period now. We're already seeing some better deals on the multifamily side. That's for another video. I guess the last thing I'll touch on here is just back to the property taxes. If you want to manually calculate those, we can actually take this address again, and we'll go back to the assessor website. So you can see we have, they haven't valued it. We don't have property tax history, but you can go to the tax districts and you can add up all these levies. So the total levy is, so it's like 0.086. So you can just copy that levy rate. And now you don't know what the assessed value is going to be. But most of the time it's not going to be any higher than the list price. And so if you take the levy rate and multiply it times the purchase price or list price, it's 384, I believe, 990, something like that. The most you're going to get in property taxes is 3,300. So you could also throw that into the proforma to throw you off by 1,000. But generally, that supports our theory between $2,000 and $3,000 would work for taxes on this. But you should only have to do that on brand new properties. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe.